Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of Only a Bag, the Guide to Italian Travel. I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And I'm Darcy Melton.
And you might have noticed we said the Guide to Italian Travel instead of an Italian Travel podcast because we are changing it to an Italian Travel podcast, but we want to sort of ease y'all into this.
Italy travel, right?
We are changing it to an Italy Travel podcast, but we want to ease y'all into this. We are changing it because when you type in Italy podcast or Italy Travel, ours doesn't really pop up for the first 25, 30 podcasts, maybe 40. And sometimes on Apple, it doesn't pop up at all. But when you type in Italian Travel, we're like number 2 behind Untold Italy, which is a huge Italian travel podcast. So we're doing a little late housekeeping to just kind of play around with the algorithm a little bit and see if we can find more listeners.
To please the internet.
We want to please the internet. We want to please you, dear internet. And that's what we aim to do. But today, we're going to be talking about something that is also pleasing the internet, I think. And that is how to live in Italy, student visas, or how to apply for a student visa, or the easiest way to live in Italy, apply for a student visa. I like to come up with a couple titles while I work on these.
I thought that was really good.
Thank you. And that'll be, I think, we're continuing this from episode number something or another, which we just came out last week. It's How to Live in Italy, where we did talk about student visas, work visas, obtaining your citizenship if you have like Italian ancestry, and then also like the digital nomad visa, which kind of falls under work visa, but it doesn't. It's a new thing. It's its own separate thing. So this is a continuation of that because we had a lot of it looked like a lot of good feedback around the previous episode, How to Live in Italy. It got a number of listens in the first, or for us, a record number, I should say, in the first couple of days. And if you'd like, there's a poll still open on Spotify. If you like, basically it's just asking, do you like listening to things about how to live in Italy, or are you just interested in traveling in Italy? So you just want to know like museums, restaurants, what to see, what to do type things. So this is a continuation of that past episode. If you haven't seen it and you'd like to just get started, you can absolutely go check out that previous episode.
Yeah, it was really good, I think. Good primer for this episode.
Great primer. And can anybody follow us anywhere?
Yes, Nathaniel, great question. People can follow us on Instagram at Only a Bag Podcast, and also, well, that's the only place you can follow. No, that's not true. You can also follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us, and that's onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, onlyabag.com. There we go.
And we're actually revamping it, and we are always revamping it. I think if you go back and listen to like 30 of our last 50 episodes, we talk about revamping the website because it feels like you need a good, solid website in order to be a living human being these days.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of how the world is working. And websites are hard, especially so we've done several websites for different ventures, but we want to make sure this one is really super easily accessible and that you can find everything you're looking for very quickly. So we're working on making sure it's that way.
Absolutely, especially with a sort of emphasis to those things like if you just bought a flight or if you're about to buy a flight, what do you look for? If you're going to buy a train ticket, what's the difference between those different train tickets? Everything we've talked about in the podcast, we just want to boil it down to, essentially a 5-minute read of just the most important things to know. That way you can save it on your phone. If you've missed your train or something like that, you can always just pull up the article and have it answers immediately, basically. So how are we going to start today's episode?
Well, so we're talking about how to get a student visa, and you asked a really good question, which I kind of skipped over in my mind, and that is, why would you even get a student visa?
That is a great question, Darcy, via Nathaniel. And I think the reason for that would be, it's twofold, and we've kind of talked about this in that previous episode. And the first thing is, honestly, it's probably the easiest visa to get if you don't have another easy way into Italy. And when I say easy, I do mean family reunification or proving that you are, like we talked about the last episode, proving you're an Italian citizen, which just means reclaiming your Italian citizenship. But if you're not in one of those two, then the student visa really is the easiest way to go. And in this episode, we're going to break that down, what that means. We're going to talk about a little bit about the requirements, talking about which schools offer courses in English, how long you can extend this for. We basically want to give you as much information as possible, but I want to also be clear kind of at the top of the episode that if this is something that's interesting to you, we do highly encourage you to do research yourself.
Absolutely.
Because one thing we're going to, I think, repeat pretty much throughout this episode is that every school seems slightly different in terms of their requirements, in terms of the cost, in terms of the needs, the necessities, etc. The only thing that's a constant is the student visa requirements itself, which is from the government, obviously not from the school. So that is, I think, the only thing that would be different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something I didn't realize about the student visa, I was under the misapprehension that if you came here on a student visa and, maintained that even for 10 years or something, you're learning and you may stay a student for 10 years, I didn't realize that you could then become applicable for an Italian citizenship. So this really is a way that, regular people without, like Nathaniel, without, blood rights sort of access to Italy, that you can become Italian eventually.
And that's the thing. I think that is a huge part of the visa is, I think, only the tourist visa. There might be a few others like medical visa, other things like that, sports visa, that your trip to Italy will not count towards your citizenship. But anytime you have like a permesso di soggiorno, which is a permission to stay, which is a residency visa, it seems like, and I'm saying seems like a lot, but it's because, again, these things can change on a dime. It's something we talked about in the last episode. They just, whatever, if a judge wants to change it, it seems changed until it's a judge changes it back. But it genuinely seems like if you're here for student, work, family reunification, anything, then all of those years you spend here will count towards your citizenship. And so you need 10 years of living here to become a citizen. And if you want to spend 4 as a student, that counts towards citizenship. But if you also want to spend 10 as a student, as much as I can find, there's nothing against that. If you want to, hit up 2 or 3 different schools, get 2 or 3 different degrees, yeah, it doesn't seem like there's anything against that. So if you ever have a goal, if you're listening and you're like, I'd love to one day live in Italy, and I don't know how to do that. It just seems quite difficult on a political level in terms of how do I navigate the paperwork? How do I navigate, like, what is my purpose? Because I know a lot of countries have I guess it's like if you have a highly desirable skill, highly valued skill, highly skilled worker visa. I think Italy probably has something similar, but I don't really know in terms of, I think there's work visas, but I don't think it's like, I think Canada, for instance, has like, if you're a scientist and if you're a doctor or whatever it is from the States, you can go and apply for a residency visa there. I don't know if Italy has the same thing in terms of...
I don't know. We should definitely look it up, given that we're doing this series on visas, but I haven't found that in my research so far.
Exactly. And we'll talk about that for sure, though, when we do talk about the work visa, because that would fold into it. So where do we start with this student visa?
Well, let me check my notes.
That's fair. And I think potentially the first place to start, unless you have a different note that says something else, is which schools offer courses in English?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, does that work?
That was the top of my notes.
That was
so yes.
Well, then there we go.
Agreed.
So what have you found as courses or as schools offering courses in English?
There are tons. It really is mind-boggling to me how many schools across Italy have any courses, full degrees in English, and how many, like the wide variety of degrees that you can get. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I don't remember. Do you have specific names? I have cities in my mind.
I think I have. I have names in terms of like the Sapienza, which is the major university in Rome. It's
where lots of famous people went for university, evidently.
Maria Montessori. So shout out everyone.
Shout out to Maria Montessori.
Montessori school. Yeah, no, that's a very famous one. Sapienza is huge, and then I think there's like a Politecnico in Milan. I think there's some sort of Policlinico or Federico in Naples. There's Padua, Parma, Pisa.
The one in Bologna is the oldest university in?
I think it's the oldest, depending on your classification of oldest. It's one of the oldest universities in the world.
Mm-hmm. And it was the first to admit women.
Yeah,
right?
which is fascinating.
Cool. Yeah.
So if you ever want to go to Bologna, is also, we'll talk about that in a second, but just when we kind of talk about cities. But Bologna, if you're looking for a place that's quite, I don't know, I've never been to Bologna, I should say that, but we've heard tons about Bologna from people who've lived there, who went to school there, and it seems like a very open and accepting place, like quite individual in terms of Italy. Like Italy is, depending where you are, it might be more, open, it might be more conservative, like socially in terms of like harder to make connections with people. It could just kind of like, if you're not part of the family, if you're not part of the old school friend group, then it's a little hard to kind of break into that barrier of like, oh, we should be friends. Even if you're in a city, it's still like, realizing after you spent a couple of years there that like, oh, I don't really have any friends. It's just, I'm not part of any group necessarily.
But there are also, I think you and I were talking about this off mic, there's also parts of Italy that are politically conservative. I think it's easy to think that in Europe, everybody is very singular minded politically, but that is not true because people are people and different parts of Italy have different political, sort of generally different political beliefs.
Well, political beliefs, religious beliefs, I mean, anything. So, and which is all to say, like, if you're thinking about school in Italy, especially if you're like, oh, it's all going to be Catholic or it's all going to be quite conservative or it's all going to be, those are the two big ones. I think when you look at maybe Italy from like a wide angle, like from outside of Italy, I think it's easy to think that like, oh, it's a Catholic country, right? And it's very not really. Very much isn't.
Not so much anymore.
So that's something just to consider if you're coming. We'll talk, like I said, about Bologna in a second. But there are a lot of schools, and I have a little figure. It's roughly accurate. It's from I think it's from 2024, and it's a little bit skewed in the terms of it does include. This figure will include universities that are like London School of Economics or the School of Toronto or something like that, where it might be a school that teaches in English in its home country and then also has a satellite campus in Italy and also teaches in English there. But there is just under 200 universities offering, or 200 bachelor's courses in Italy, not 200 schools offering bachelor's courses, but there are 200 courses in which you can receive a bachelor's degree at the end of it that are offered in English. There are 700 courses for master's degree, and they're just under 100 for a PhD. It seems like, kind of makes sense that a lot of the postgrad school, the master's classes will happen in English because it's supposed to attract students from around Europe. And something else I read that sort of ties into this is Italy and most of all European countries are part of something called like the European Education EEHA, I think is what it's called, something like that. And essentially what it means is that any credits you get in university in any of these countries, and it's basically considering it's Greenland, Iceland, all the way over to Russia. So including Kazakhstan, including Turkey, including Georgia. So it's essentially this entire northern hemisphere from Greenland to Russia. Is any credits you get in school there can be used for any other school in that region. So like if you're coming as a student from, let's say, the United States, you went to the University of Bologna, you loved it, and then a friend says, oh, you got to try the University of Berlin. It's amazing. It's a different vibe. You're going to love it. You can apply to school there if you get the student visa, and all your credits from the University of Bologna will transfer to this University of Berlin. Or
that's really cool.
Kazakhstan, which is just fascinating that if you want to go there too.
Yeah, some people do.
So it's a lot more connected. And I think and maybe actually it's a good thing to segue into the use of a degree that you get in Italy.
Right.
And when I say use of a degree, I mean, I think and you would know more. I never went to college, but you might know more.
I went for 1 year, so I have a lot more experience. Of knowledge here.
But was there any fear around like, oh, if I don't go in the States, I can't use that degree in the States?
Oh, for sure. Up until, not that I had fear of it recently, but I definitely had the idea that not all degrees would transfer. But also in addition to that, I think a lot of Americans and probably a lot of people just in the Western world, we have the idea that if you have any sort of bachelor's degree, you are more likely to get a job.
Yeah, for sure.
Than maybe someone who doesn't, regardless of your skill level. So I had sort of a dual mind about it that, any degree is better than none as far as getting a job goes. It's not a personal belief. But also there was some worry that if it were even a well-known university, but a university outside the U.S., that it wouldn't, count, air quotes.
No, and I think that's what I found when I looked it up. Taking law aside and then medicine maybe aside because it's a little different, but like business management or economics or I don't know, philosophy, anything else like that. It seems like in the United States, there is no one governing body that says, yes, this is a valid degree or no, this is not a valid degree if a school's accredited in general. And I seem that it's a difference between somebody starting a school in their garage and then somebody going to school in Europe. They are not viewed as the same thing. It's like if you graduated from a school in Europe, it's still viewed quite highly. Sort of like, I imagine why when people say, I went to the Sorbonne, it's like, oh, that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, that sucks for you because you can't use that degree in the States. It also seems like, from what I've found, that if a company wants to hire you, it really doesn't matter where you got your degree from. It's up to them to say like, oh yeah, you went to Italy. That's crazy. For 4 years and you graduated from like Sapienza University. That's insane. Okay, yeah, we'll take you. And if they're like, oh, that doesn't mean anything to us, we don't care. There seem to be some governmental organizations that allow you to transfer your European gained degree, not necessarily into American one, but to show that it is accredited. There's a couple different like certifications you can get.
Interesting. Okay.
But even the websites made it kind of seem like you don't really need this. It kind of felt very like, if you want to, you can. So I'm not entirely sure how useful that is, but from what it seemed like, and very anecdotal, is that living abroad and going to school anywhere in Europe or anywhere outside of the United States, and then finding a job later in the United States, it seemed like if you went to school abroad, they might think that you have another language under your belt, that you have world experience, that you might be on the, like, especially if you're applying to like a multinational company or something like that, you look like a better prospect to be placed abroad than somebody who's never been abroad. Like if you're like, oh, you can easily fit into a new culture, we'd love to have you on board.
Yeah, that's 2 life skills that you're gaining just by being somewhere else, is being able to meld and understand new cultures. And also you're very likely to learn Italian if you go to university here.
And that's actually something to add into. You obviously, just to be super clear, when we say these courses are in English, the entire course is in English, and you do not need to learn Italian to take the course, but you do have to pass a test that verifies that you know English. So it's a little, if you're obviously from the United States or England or Australia, you probably know English, and you probably won't have an issue with it. Maybe the Americans will, because I do believe the tests are in British English.
Oh, that's an interesting point. What I found was that, so I looked at specifically the university, the Sapienza in Rome, and maybe the one in Bologna had a very similar point, was that if you are a native English speaker and you could prove that, you're from the US or the UK, you don't have to take the English test necessarily.
Okay.
But if you weren't born in an English speaking country, you had to prove your level of English. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Okay. So that would make a lot of sense, because there's a lot of students obviously from everywhere else in the world in Italy. And so it makes sense that they're saying, like, if you're going to take the course in English, that you need to know English. You can't be, I guess, sitting at the back of the class nodding and going like, I have Google Translate, I'll figure this out at home, kind of thing. That makes sense. So to tie this up, essentially, there are no fewer than 50 or 60 universities in Italy that all offer courses in English. Some of them are already American, I'm putting quotation marks around this, American schools. The John Cabot University we mentioned in the last episode is in Rome. There's the American University of Florence. That's a university in Florence that is American, I think just for American students. I don't think it's attached to any other school, though. I think it's their own school.
Okay.
Then, of course, there's a lot of other, like I mentioned earlier, the London School of Economics and Toronto University. I think UGA has a campus in Cortona, and there's like that kind of thing. The University of Georgia has a campus in Cortona.
But you can't get a full degree there, right? That's just for...
I think it's just for study abroad.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's just a semester at a time. And that's the thing. Like this, a lot of even the American University in Florence has a lot of study abroad programs, study abroad courses where it's not a full degree. It's just like for one semester or just for a couple credits or whatever it is. And one thing you're going to notice if you do get interested in this and you are like, oh, that actually sounds like, it could be really nice, is that the American universities that do have schools in Italy tend to be closer to American prices.
Yes.
That's going to be the biggest difference. And when we talk about prices soon, that I think is going to be the biggest difference that you'll notice, is that there's a bit of a discrepancy in the old pricing scheme.
Yeah, between American universities and basically the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's next?
Let's talk about prices. Let's get straight into it, because I feel like that's a big buzz.
It is a buzz. It's a big important thing. Well, I think maybe the first thing to mention on prices is that for those of you listening, especially those of you who are, in case we have any high schoolers listening, welcome. Or for those of you who are young and considering college abroad, or if you've already graduated from college in the United States, but you're considering a postgraduate degree in Italy.
And just as a heads up, I believe that it is spring and early summer that you'll need to be applying for university. If you want to go in 2025, if you want to come to an Italian university, I believe the application things are due for a lot of these universities in the spring and early summer. So you have time.
That is good to know. Okay. Good to know. And also, yeah, actually, that's a good thing. Maybe before we talk about pricing, one thing is requirements.
Okay.
Just to get those out there for people listening. This is what I found. And again, this might change based on when you're listening to this. This might change based on who you're finding it from. Did you find requirements as well?
Somewhat. What do you mean?
Well, I found that to apply for the student visa, you need a 2.5 GPA average.
Really?
Which is not that high.
It is not.
I say that as somebody who very frequently skirted with a 2.5 GPA average. I know I'm sitting in a room with somebody who has a perfect 4.0, but this was a very judgmental.
I'm brushing off my shoulder.
So I think that 2.5 is really not that high in terms of what I think, what is that, like a 75% if your school does percentages instead of letter grades? That's quite
It feels doable.
It feels insanely doable, yes. So that's the first thing you need for the student visa. The second thing you need is actually the acceptance letter from the university. So step 1 is applying to university. Step 2 is then getting the visa. So that 2.5, though, does change when a university, for instance, might have like a 3.0 or 3.2 or 3.5, whatever it is, minimum GPA requirement.
Right.
So that's a big thing to keep in mind. Like that 2.5 is just, I'm assuming it's one of those things where it's like if you're somebody with a lot of family connections and, your uncle's the dean of Sapienza or something like that, they're not just going to let you in the school unless you can prove that you are, supposed to be there, I think.
Yeah, passing some classes.
Well, and that brings us to the other one. So the student visa is only good for 1 year at a time. Each year you have to reapply for it. And the process is quite simple in terms of you apply for the visa when you're in your home country. And then as soon as you land, let's say it's accepted, as soon as you land in Italy, you apply for a residency permit. It's within the first 8 days. So don't get too comfortable.
I also, just a quick thing, I don't know how much universities will help you themselves to make sure you're meeting all the requirements. I mean, you will be an adult. Welcome to the world. If you're turning 17 or 18 looking into college, you have to do things on your own. But I do know
Darcy's laughing as somebody who was told there will be a counselor helping her with things and then realized there very much is not a counselor helping with anything.
Nope.
Very much into
not where I went.
Fun little bath of fire.
But so there are requirements, for getting your student visa and maintaining that. However, I believe that schools will give you guidance on how to make sure you're doing everything correctly. You're not just going to be plopped into the middle of a city with, no one at all to help you. I do think there will be directions. You'll probably be given a packet, some sort of information on what you're supposed to be doing.
Because these schools do accept a fair, thousands of people that are international students. So there is definitely framework in place to help you move through that initial process of, okay, you just landed, you're super jet lagged, you have to go get your residency permit, you have to start filling out paperwork, applying for things. All the paperwork obviously is in Italian because, I guess why not? But it is not as hard as it seems. It seems overwhelming, I think, when you're not doing it. But as soon as you're doing it, you're like, oh, this is much easier than I thought.
And so you need a student visa. You have to renew it every year, right? Do you renew it in Italy? Because the first time you get it from the consulate in the U.S.
And it seems like, from what I found, is you renew it when you're in Italy. Yes.
Okay.
So you don't have to go home, renew it, come back, and do the whole process.
You go to the questura, right?
Yeah, you just go to the immigration office and you keep renewing as you would normally. And again, I'm assuming that there is some sort of protocol in place. Like if you're at a university, if you've already passed your first year, then they'll say, okay, everybody who's an international student on this day, we'll fill out the paperwork, and then we'll all send it off together at the post office, or like a field trip. I don't know. I assume there's something though, because not where we are, because we're in a very small town, but in most cities, in most small towns, actually, there is somebody who does help you with immigration paperwork. I am completely spacing on the name right now of the person who helps the guy down the valley. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I can't remember what his job title is.
I know. It's something. It's the patronato, I think. Is that right? Patronato?
That sounds right. It's been so long since we've
been so long since we've done this.
By a patronato.
I think that's what it is.
That's it.
So essentially, it's somebody who's paid by the government who works, and all their job is basically is you have any immigration questions at all, you go there. They usually speak a variety of languages. The ones we've talked to speak English, Spanish, Italian. Some speak Arabic. Some speak Mandarin. Some speak. There's kind of they all have the the bigger the cities, the more languages are spoken kind of thing. And if you have any questions, just like, how do I fill this out? Or what do I do? Or, I was talk about in a second, like what happens when you graduate? Can you apply for a new visa kind of thing? So that's, if you really have trouble, that is kind of where you go. But in your school, there should be someone. So 2.5 GPA, acceptance letter from the school, and then proof of where you're living. If you are going to be living at the school and paying for that, then that works as proof of living. We're going to talk, when we talk about pricing, the prices we're going to list does not include the rent for the student accommodation or
food or
anything like that. It's just the tuition. Mm-hmm. So you can also find your own lodging if you prefer. We talked about this very briefly in the previous episode. A lot of college towns have a lot of housing, and the Italian government does offer a fairly nice tax credit for people who rent out their houses as student housing. So something you will find if you go on, I guess in English is Idealista in Italian.
.it. Because they have a big, I think their main
is Spain.
So I always end up on the Spain website.
Yeah, doing .com is the Spanish website, but IT is the Italian website. There's also Immobiliare, which is, it sounds like Immobile, ARE.
Yeah.
And that one is another rental website. And you'll see on there, especially around when the end of the summer, when students are back in, and I think between December and January is another new session, another new quarter. And that's when you'll see a bunch of things up for rent. And a lot of them say students only, must show, paperwork, whatever, you're something from the school that says you go there. So that's all quite simple. The only difficult one, I would say, depending on your economic status, is you do need money in the bank, or at least a promissory note from somebody that can give you money. And I think is pretty much what it boils down to.
Yeah, it's basically you need money in your bank account, or your parents have to sign is it called a promissory note? It's
something like that.
There's a word with a P, but basically they can pay for you to get out of trouble, and they can pay, not to pay off the cops, I mean.
But more like if you can't pay rent, they will pay rent for you. If you can't pay your utility bill, it's like it's kind of like it's like a cosigner is kind of what you need if you don't have the money. And I believe, unless it's been updated, the last figure we looked at is it's pegged to the unemployment money. So the money somebody will receive for unemployment is, I think, 460 euros and 23 cents a month. Mm-hmm. So essentially you need more than that every month to be in Italy. And that's about 5,061 euros, give or take, every year is what you need in your account. So if you're going to be here for a year, you just need to show a piece of paperwork from your bank with your name on it and your account number on it that says you have more than 5,000 something euros.
I also saw it broken down on, maybe it was the Boston consulate site, that said that you need 30 euros a day in your account. So if you're going to be here for a year, for 2 semesters, multiply 30 by however many days that is that you'll be here.
That's what I saw too. And then, but if it's only $460 a month, then that's, you're blowing through that in 15 days. So that ends up being almost double.
Interesting. I didn't actually do the math.
No, so I that's something, again, this is that thing of look into it. This is a few different websites for the EU websites that basically saying if you're going to apply for school, just have more than 5,000 in your account. And as we've mentioned in the last episode, you can work while you're in Italy. It might be a little difficult because you might not find a job that will hire you if you don't speak Italian. So that won't work for a lot of you potentially. And I know that sometimes the school will have jobs, if you work the front desk, or I don't know.
The library,
that seems like a popular one.
I would work in the library.
Yeah. So if that's always an option, you can work a maximum of 20 hours a week on the student visa. And I think those are the big ones. Basically, GPA, acceptance letter, a place to live, and an X amount of money, more than 5,000 euros it should be for the year.
And a valid passport.
Oh, and valid passport. Yes. Yeah, that's a big one. And that is genuinely it. There's no other restrictions in terms of, like we mentioned earlier, there's no age restrictions, there's no country of origin restrictions, there's no anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
the visa part is remarkably, I'm not going to say it's easy because you do have to put in work to get all of that together.
For sure.
It does feel, I think I said earlier that, the GPA was doable. It feels like a doable list of things to do if you really want to be here.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to now pricing for the schools.
Yeah, let's do it.
What did you find?
I found up to basically for public Italian universities about up to 5,000 euros a year.
That's what I found as well. And there is a difference between public and private in Italy. I think just like anywhere else, practically. I mean, there's some, I know places that don't allow private. But if you're going to, I mean, I don't know what would be private here, but I mean, I'm curious, like John Cabot might be considered private here. I'm not entirely sure.
When I looked up a list of some universities that have full, like bachelor's degrees and master's degrees in English, there was only, on this one website, had a list of 10, and 1 out of the 10 was private.
Okay, because there's a Catholic school. I don't know which one it is. It's a famous one. I only know it exists because when you type in how to fill out a permesso di soggiorno in English, it's this Catholic school that has a step-by-step how to fill out the permesso di soggiorno in English PDF that you can download, and it's very helpful. And
I used it at least the first time that I filled out my permesso di soggiorno. It was incredibly helpful.
it really is, and that's, I know that they're a private school. I think all Catholic universities are private, so if you're going to Catholic, you're paying private instead of public. But I found that it's essentially, depending where you go, 0 up to about 5,000 euros, the average price being between 800 and 1,200 a year. I also found that Italy does not seem to sort of differentiate on its financial aid if you're an international student or if you are a Italian student. So and it's a little bit funky though, if you are from the States, England, Australia, pretty much any country with a high GDP, Switzerland, in case you're listening to this from Switzerland, it seems like with those, you're a little bit less able to apply for certain financial aid. And part of it, I think, is because when they're saying, financial aid, they mean from countries where you're making $100 a month, not maybe $1,000 a month, even though, you might both be left off for the same amount of money at the end of the month. It's sort of, they're saying you're still making money. And so I think that is the only thing to kind of pay attention to, but you can apply for financial aid. And even if you don't, I think like University of Perugia was one of them, that it seemed to be about 2,000 for the year. I think Sapienza was about almost 3,000, like 2,900 for the year. And that doesn't include, like we said earlier, it doesn't include lodging, doesn't include food, doesn't include anything like that. But on the opposite side, you have like John Cabot University, you have American University in Rome, or in Florence. And how much are those?
Well, John Cabot is, 22,000? Is that right?
I think it was about that. Yeah, I think it was 28 if you're American or Canadian, 22 if you're not.
Okay.
And I think the American University in Florence is 22,000 euros. So I don't know, depends what the exchange rate is, but let's just say $22,000 right now as well. So that's, it's not like,
that's a big difference.
That's a pretty big difference. Like we're close to Georgia Southern in the United States. That's our local, like, not community college, but like that's everyone's like safety school, I think,
it's some people's school. It's a college.
No. I mean, but like, it's like, I think we went to school with a lot of people who are like, it's UGA, and then it's like Georgia Tech, and that's like Georgia Southern. So there's definitely like that, like, that, because I think now that they've bought up they bought up another school, but originally they were out in the middle of nowhere. Like their campus was in the tiny little, like, the sticks. So everyone was in Statesboro.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone's
a place
like,
where real people live.
Yeah, but everyone's like, nothing happens in Statesboro, especially when you're like Georgia Tech and Georgia UGA are like in cities.
You cannot be pooping on Statesboro right now. Georgia Southern is my dad's alma mater.
I know if he listens to this, he's going to be very excited that we're talking about it. I have no idea. So with that, like in that sense, that I think even that school is somewhere in the range of 20 to 23,000 a year. Maybe
is that for in-state?
I think that's for in-state.
Okay.
So that's an interesting comparison in terms of like, you can go to, a Georgia school as an in-state resident, or you can go to Italy and pay the same.
About the same. Being an international student.
Exactly. An international student of leisure or mystery. But the other interesting thing, I think, is what are the other costs associated with it? And that essentially, and again, we don't really know, too much about like how much your books are going to cost. I don't know if I know that in the States, again, I never went to college, but I've heard that the college textbook is just like a huge racket.
Dumb
where it's
expensive.
Just like the professor's like, you have to have my book. And it's like a $900 textbook. And people are just like, this is ridiculous way to spend money. And I don't think it's like that in the States, because we've been to some, we've been to some bookstores that do have.
You don't think it's like that in the States?
Oh, I'm sorry. In Italy.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't think it's like that in Italy, because we have been to some places or some bookstores, they have university textbooks and they're like, 20, 30 euros each. So I don't know if that's just like the ones that no one asks for, or if like, If those are the, if it's more of a government, because a lot of these are public schools. So I don't know if like the government sets the agenda. I don't really know how this works. I don't really know how it works in any college, to be honest.
I don't know either. Books are not foreign to me, but the idea of paying for college textbooks, I don't have a whole lot of clarity on.
But essentially, well, the big thing is the rent. And if you want to live alone, you obviously are going to pay a little bit more. You're probably going to pay, depending on where you live, because Rome is going to be a different price than Bologna, different price than Milan. I mean, Rome is going to be the cheapest out of those three. I think usually Bologna is weirdly quite expensive. And I mean, it's usually in the range of 1,000 to 1,200 euros a month for Bologna.
I would say most cities with a college that is teaching, I mean, with a big college, which would be teaching English, they're going to have higher rent prices than basically anywhere else, it seems to me. Like Perugia, we lived in for a little while. And I mean, especially the last time we lived there, students were coming back. And we lived there during COVID, so renting was a bit different. And then when students were coming back, prices were very high, and it was quite limited just because there were so many people in the city and so many students looking to rent. There was not a lot of availability, within walking distance, and it was that affordable for us.
Well, that was actually the weird thing, is there was tons available when we first rented, and then we realized about a month in that the apartment was not as described. And so we were like, oh, we're gonna find something else. And our real estate agent was very helpful and was showing us tons, but it was really very much like, we see something at 3:30, somebody else is seeing it at 3:15, and then we find out at 3:17 they've accepted, and then we see something at 3:30 and they're like, if you don't say yes now, it's not available at 5 o'clock. Like, these things are going now. And I think we walked into one place like a day or two later, and we said, we're looking to rent. Like, yeah, that's fine. What, like, when were you thinking? We're like, this week. And they're like, oh my god. No. You come back in 3 months and we can help you out, but there's nothing right now.
I think it's probably pretty similar in other, college towns in the States.
I will say though, just in that terms of price. So Perugia, the school there is this is the University of Perugia, not the University of Foreigners, which we mentioned in the last episode. University of Perugia also has courses in English, and I think they charge about 2,000, 1,500 to 2,000, depending on who you are. And we rented there for 400 euros a month, not including utilities. But for two of us, easily 1,000 euros a month would get us by without an issue. So if you are looking for, like, I just want to get out of, like, wherever you are, States, Australia, England, anywhere, and you want to spend a year somewhere, if you want to spend 6 months somewhere, if you want to spend 4 years somewhere, that's like a really good place. Because I think in terms of just simply, you need very little money to get started. It's quite international. A lot of people speak English. It's a bit centrally located in the sense that it's quite close to, like, Florence and Siena and Rome, kind of, in terms of, like, it's close to Rome, but there's not like a fast train there. You have to kind of take a slower train, unfortunately.
It's a great little city.
Great little city, close-ish to a lake for swimming if you're into freshwater swimming instead of saltwater swimming. And no, there's a lot to be said about a place like Perugia, because it is sort of a very affordable, very beautiful old city that you can go to college in. You can get a degree.
But even Rome, I think you and I think about this all the time. So we're from Savannah, and rental prices there have been skyrocketing over the past couple of years. And to rent what would be almost equal, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, or 2 bedroom, 1 bath in Rome is about the same price as it would be in Savannah, at about 1,200, 1,500 euros.
Okay, I can see that. Where in Savannah can you get 1,200 or 1,500 euros though?
I don't know.
Because I was thinking, because I only ask though because I know that we check occasionally. And it's like, for a 1 bedroom, it's like 1,800 to 1,900 a month.
I think it depends on the neighborhood.
Okay. Because that's a big, like, honestly, with $2,000 in Rome, you are, penthouse apartment, kind of wood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, like, because we've looked at, like, some of these, like, Farnesina and Flaminio neighborhoods, and are these gorgeous apartment buildings with the doorman downstairs that buzzes you in. And it's, some for like 1,600 euros a month. It's insane.
I think it depends on the time of year that you're looking.
Yeah,
I looked recently,
sure.
And there were some that were quite lovely for about, 1,200, 1,300, that were a 1 bedroom, wood floors. They didn't have a door person, but,
Well, that one you saw one with a wraparound terrace.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was lovely.
Yeah.
So if you're looking, this is why we say that the student visa is such a powerful tool in order to kind of live in Italy, is because it's kind of amenable to what you need in terms of exploration, basically. If you're mid 40s, mid 50s, if you're like, I'm kind of retired, I don't really want to be doing this anymore, I have money saved up, I might as well go see what it's like, living in Italy. And I don't, we don't think we mentioned at the beginning, you do need to take 20 hours of coursework a week. I thought it was 40. In the last episode, I mentioned 40. And for whatever reason, it's like all the websites I had saved. Now I'll say 20. So I don't know if it changed or if I just absolutely cannot read. I'm willing to bet it's the second one. So you only need to take 20 hours a week of coursework. You can also work up to 20 hours a week if you want to fill up your 40 hours doing work and schoolwork. But if you also don't, you could just spend 20 hours a week. That's like a part-time job, kicking around Rome, exploring the sweet life. And then, I don't know, like...
Yeah, do you just check on what your university requires? Because some of them only have, a course load that is 40 hours. You're not always able to do half of it. So just check what your university requires. And also on that note, for looking at specific universities, obviously they all have different requirements, just like universities anywhere. So some of them you'll have to take an entrance exam. Some of them you just have to prove your GPA and send your high school diploma and all that regular stuff. Some of them, I think one of the universities in Rome had I don't know if it was required or recommended, a 1-year course to get all of your basic core classes in.
Okay, interesting.
But that was pretty specific to that university. So that has nothing to do with the visa. That's just specific.
Like make sure you have your basics before you apply to school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think the other thing I wanted to mention as we kind of get towards the end of not the end of the episode necessarily, we have a few more things to mention, but the end of this idea about the student visa is for those of you who are thinking, that would be lovely, but I have kids, I can't go. Or I have to take care of somebody else, I can't go. Or I'm married, we can't both get visas, I can't go. If you are on the student visa, you can also have your spouse, your children, you can apply for them. Or I think it's basically 4 different groups, and it's your spouse, children below 18, your parents above 65, whom they rely on you, and then also children above 18 who have health issues, so they rely on you. But all 4 groups of people can apply for a family reunification visa and then come with you to Italy. And it gets a little complicated there in the sense that, and kind of as we continue, because I think we've pretty much wrapped up student visa beyond that. When you are done with school, you can apply for what's called an attestato di lavoro, which is like, I guess, like a attestation that you're trying to find work. It's not a work visa, but I'm job hunting.
It's like a
basically.
Stopgap, sort of a promise that you're looking.
So there's not like a requirement, basically. They're not expecting you to find a job before you graduate. They're just saying you have a year. I think it's 6 months to a year, but it usually seems to be a year to find a job once you graduate. Or unless you want to go back to school, in which case you can just simply reapply for college and then go back to a different school. And it seems a little bit, it gets confusing, it gets muddy. And this is where I would definitely, if you have the money or if you have the time, go to the Patronato, I think it's Patronato, or someone to help, a lawyer, something like that, and ask about how the visa situation would work, because obviously your family would be on your visa in terms of they're reunifying with you, the person living in Italy. But stuff I found was like, if you're embedded in Italian society kind of thing and you have to go back because you can't find a job, it's like they're not kicking the family out. It gets really like funky in terms of just no one's really clear on what it is or what it might mean. It seems like I was kind of just going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, clicking link after link, trying to figure out what it meant. Like if, let's just say, I lost a student visa and then I couldn't find a job after a year and we had kids. It's like we all have, go back home, but it's been 4 years. How does that work? It's like we all speak Italian. We all, it seems a little confusing. So I do absolutely suggest that you research, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. I would love to be the one-stop shop for all of this information, but it seems a lot of it is going to be tailored information.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is a case-by-case basis. So if you can, I would definitely talk to a patronato or like you said, a lawyer who shouldn't be terribly expensive like they are in the States, but I'm not really sure. But somebody who is more official than us.
Absolutely.
To look at your specific case.
Yeah. But that is all to say, if something that is keeping you back, if you're just like, I would love to go, but I have family, and they are in a place where moving seems like an option, because obviously moving to Italy is this huge venture. Like, this is not like moving down the street is a huge venture.
Yeah.
But moving to Italy is a massive, massive endeavor. But if that's something that seems attractive, if it's something that, because we know people who have families who are like interested just in like, just changing things up, sort of just like, I want to just do something different. I want to move to a different state. Maybe I want to move to just just do something else, change jobs. And I think this is one of those options where it's like, oh, I didn't realize that was that cheap. Because you do need, I should add, if you are using the family reunification visa, it seems a little bit tricky, but I don't think people can work under that. So if your spouse comes, for instance, they won't be able to work while you're at school. If they applied, let's just say, for like a digital nomad visa, I think things are different. Or if they applied for some other sort of visa. I don't know if they can, I don't know if they can actually job search while they're here. It's like, since they're here anyway, can you job search and then get a work visa? I'm not entirely sure how that works, but I will say is if you do the family reunification visa on top of like a student visa, you do need essentially double the amount of money in your account that you, like one person would be about 5,000, two people about 11,000. Kids, it's a little bit less. It's not like 5,000 per kid. It ends up only like 1,300 or something. It's like half the amount for kids or something. Mm-hmm. So you will need more money in your account for that year. And of course, if you're in a place like Rome, you're going to need more money in the account. If it's not just you eating pasta and like, I don't know, just arancini every day.
If it's not just you roughing it, but you have other people depending on you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
then
you do have to pay
might help
more.
that money. But we have friends who have basically have, we don't have this, but we have friends who have those Silicon Valley jobs who are like basically caught between do I buy a truck and drive around America for the next couple months or a year just working out of my truck, or do I, do that digital nomad move abroad thing? And I'm like, you could just come to Italy if you wanted to.
I think we also know people who have kids and who, this would be a massive life change, but who are making ends meet in the US, but that same amount of money that they have saved up to, pay for their next year of their life could pay for their life here in Italy. So, if you can make it work, I think there are some situations where as a parent with small children, you can live here. Does that make sense? You can live here on savings. And on that note, if you're worried about, bringing kids over, there are international schools, elementary, middle, high schools for kids.
I don't want to badmouth the Italian education system because it does it by itself, honestly. But it seems for a lot of people who move here who are not Italian, they're like, the education system there, while technically good on paper, like you learn while you're in school, it seems like a madhouse, a lot of them. It seems
And it's a lot
rough.
of rote knowledge, sort of rote memorization type of stuff, at least where we are in the public schools in the South. I think there are quite a lot of, I don't know if they're private or if they're like a hybrid grant private situation. There was a Montessori school in Perugia.
Yeah.
So I think there are some other options in other parts of the country. But yeah, I don't know that I would recommend Italian school in the South.
Yeah.
Because they're just kind of sitting at desks and, reading textbooks.
Every time I walk by a school, there's a lot of shouting happening, not like from the teacher, but like from the kids. And there's a lot of, I don't know, it's very loud. It's just
it's like 1980s in the U.S.
Yes. It feels very much like that Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but like in Italy.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking like Sister Act when all the kids are like, "Aw, sister, don't make us sing," and then Whoopi Goldberg comes in and changes the whole school around.
I've never seen that movie.
I think that's the second one in Sister Act 2.
It's an airplane watch, I believe, isn't it? Yes. Mm-hmm. So what else? Is that the end of student visas?
Pretty much. One thing I do want to address that we kind of briefly touched on in the last episode was you and I mentioned Fedora, which is a pastry school. And it's actually, you found this out, it's connected to the American University of Florence?
Yes, we did mention Fedora. It is connected to the American University of Florence. It's part of their... They have it's like the American University of Florence has the Fine Arts University of Florence, which is a sub-school. And then part of that is a culinary program called, it's like Epicurus, but it's Apicurus or Apicuri, something like that. It's a little bit weird. It's like Epicurus, the Greek philosopher, but spelled with an A for some reason. And under there, they have a couple of 4-year degrees in terms of hospitality and restaurant management. They have a 4-year degree in, I think it's beer, wine, and spirits. I'm not sure what you do for 4 years, but awesome. Love that. And then from there, they have a couple of 2-year degrees, some programs, as well as just simply if you want to come for a semester and learn how to make like croissants. They have that as not specifically croissants. I think it's like Viennese pastries, but they do have that as well. But that explained why we have saw so many Americans there. Mm-hmm. However, that one is one of those $22,000 a year school.
But it is accredited.
Oh,
so
it is accredited,
if you want to learn how to make pastries or evidently spirits and beer and wine, that's a possibility for you. But just to re-clarify, things that are more of an atelier, like the Florence Academy of
Art, I think,
Art,
yeah.
which is not a 4-year degree type situation. It really is more of just a workshop sort of situation for painters and artists. That's not accredited. That's not going to get you a student visa.
Exactly. So it's a little bit, you have to kind of, I say, and I think that's really good though, thing to say to people who are, well, like yourself, an artist, fine artist, and who are looking like, because I think we looked at it for you, like, oh, that would be great. I mean, it's a ton of money, but it's like, that'd be amazing in terms of like going there and studying. But then when you realize, oh, you can't get a visa for that. That's just like on your own in terms of like, you realize they're all nicely fitting into a 3-month stay,
Right.
basically. And there's no way to get there's technically like a long-term study visa, but again, it has to be, I think, to an accredited school. There's also a short-term study visa if you're studying anywhere for less than 90 days, but that's also just like a tourist visa.
It's just a tourist visa.
So I mean, I think if you're from America, if you're from England, if you're from Australia, and you don't need, I think that short-term study visa is from people from other countries because like a lot of countries would fall into that 90-day tourist visa at the border thing. So that's a really good point, though. The atelier, yeah, if you're looking for just something fun to do, a couple months of drawing, which is not, I mean, very rigorous, not fun, I guess, but very rigorous drawing.
And you do have to apply.
Yes, and you can get denied, I guess.
Yeah.
So that, I think that is a brief look at not a brief look, but that's a look at student visas.
Yeah.
It's a pretty in-depth look. And yeah, if you're running through it again, you can bring family. You need about $5,000 per person if you are going to come, 2.5 GPA. You need to be accepted before applying. I think most of these, I don't know if you mentioned, but most of these do have free application processes. It's not like the States where you pay $25, $35, $40.
Most of them, but not all.
Yes, most of them, but not all. Some of them I did see like the little $50 application fee. So it's, again, if speaking to those of you, especially who are young, 17, 18, or the parents of those who are young, 17 and 18, who are looking at colleges, who are thinking about, who are just making a list, for those, at least for those are free, it could be interesting just to toss them on the list, send out a little application and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely would have heavily considered this, especially because I went to college in New York for 1 year, and I feel like I traveled back to the States maybe twice, once for Christmas, once for Thanksgiving, or something like that. Maybe that was together, but I think I traveled back twice in that year to visit my family, and I probably would have done the same thing if I had been in Italy. So it seems very far away, and it is geographically, but it could be a really good option.
Plus, it's a great excuse to visit your kids in your Italy. It's just like, well, we're going to come visit you, and then we're going to go.
We're just going to have a tour around Europe.
Yeah, then we're going to see other people that aren't you. But that could also be a fun little option.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's everything.
I think that's it for student visas. Yeah.
For student visas. And then in the next episode, we are going to, not specifically the next episode, but the next time we talk about how to live in Italy, we're going to talk about the work visa for those of you who the student visa does not work and would like to work as a visa.
Work.
All work all the time. Makes Jack a dull boy.
Okay.
I think it's from that Shining movie.
I think it is. I think that was not a poem. What's it called? A nursery rhyme.
Oh, well, there you go. All work and no play.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much for joining us. We have been Only a Bag, a Italy travel podcast.
Oh, and if you liked this episode, or, if you didn't like it, that's cool too. If you want to hear...
Keep that to yourself. I'm kidding.
If you want to hear more about the practicalities of living in Italy, please let us know. We have a poll. Where is it?
Yes, it's under the last episode. So it's just, the last episode is just called How to Live in Italy. On Spotify, it's under that. They let you run these little polls. And it's just a very simple, do you prefer learning about living in Italy? Do you prefer about learning about like just visiting as a tourist, or do you prefer both? Just so we know what to sort of start talking about, because we don't want to talk too much about something that all of our dear listeners who are, quite dedicated. Like we realize that it's at least the same 80 of you each episode. And so we don't want to be talking, we don't want to be talking too much about something that you are all very uninterested in.
Yeah,
so,
we don't want to bore you guys. So
exactly.
Please let us know what you're interested in. If you have a few seconds to reach out, you can reach us at our email, which is onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com, or on our website, onlyabag.com, or on Instagram at onlyabagpodcast. Just let us know what you like, what you don't like, mostly what you do like, and we will do our best to address it.
Until then, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. Tanti abbracci.